Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Senate Democratic Caucus. It is the 25th of January, my mother-in-law's birthday, if she were still with us. Anyway, I'm Allison Clarkson. I'm the majority leader I have the honor of being the majority leader of the Senate. And today we have a very special program, and to tee it up, we are going to go to our Senate President Pro Tem, Becca Balint.
Thank you, Senator Clarkson. So as I look around this Zoom, there were so many senators who had a hand in making sure that we were legalizing cannabis, making sure we had the Cannabis Control Board set up. There's been a tremendous amount of work done over the last 10 years, and probably even beyond that, to get us to this place. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Lots of leaders here on the call, Senator Sears, Senator Pearson, Senator White, many others who have been supportive, behind the scenes, and just wanted to say we feel like we're in good hands with James Pepper, who's going to be talking this morning with the work that the board is doing, but didn't want to let this moment go by without saying we are all eagerly awaiting the day when we do have the retail shops open within Vermont. So today we've invited James Pepper, who's the board chair, the executive director, and Bryn Hare, the executive director of the Cannabis Control Board, to report on their work developing Vermont's regulated cannabis market. I see James Pepper here. I don't know if Bryn is going to be able to join us. We know that getting this work right is important to this caucus and to Vermonters. And we wanted to help people understand what questions are going to be before us this session, what committees will be impacted by this work, and how we can help ensure a successful, equitable implementation of a regulated market in Vermont. So with that, very nice to see you, James Pepper. We are excited to hear what you've got to say, and thank you for taking the time to be here.
You bet, and thank you. Really, I would have to just echo what you said. Is really the Senate has shown tremendous leadership on this issue for over a decade. Not just kind of the basic decision of is this a good idea or not, but really the evolution of the policy. When we started looking at this, a long time ago, the rationale was mostly consumer safety, youth prevention, and removing kind of criminality from sales. But as the bill progressed and as kind of year after year, it really did evolve. And the bill that ultimately passed does so much more than where it started. And one of our very first meetings as a board, we invited Senator Sears and Senator Pearson, some of the real kind of thought leaders behind this that really kind of pushed this over the finish line. To help us understand, help the board understand what the legislative intent was here. What did the legislature really intend this market to look like? And we worked with them over a couple hours to kind of distill down 7 core principles. I'm going to go through a few of those very briefly, just so you can have kind of a vision of what the board is trying to do with our regulations. First is really to create a socially equitable industry. That means providing ladders of opportunity for people who were harmed by prohibition, the decade-long war on drugs, and reinvesting in communities that have suffered as a result of those convictions. So the board has embedded strategies to support social equity throughout its regulations. We've been working on, with our partners at ACCD and Department of Labor, technical assistance and support both in the application process, but also just the ongoing business management practices for social equity applicants. We have, proposals to waive fees, reduce fees, priority and expedited application review processes. There's a community business development fund, which provides low interest and revolving loans to social equity applicants. But the board also really recognized that not everyone who's been harmed by the war on drugs or by prohibition wants to be a cannabis, grower or seller. And so we've embedded strategies also to make the entire industry more equitable. We have a provision that requires our larger license holders, the people that kind of are going to be more profitable in this industry, to choose from a menu of options that we've created that will have a positive impact on social equity around the state. These include things like inclusive hiring practices, paying a livable wage, having incubator or accelerator programs for minority-owned businesses, or you can make contributions to our business development fund. And the bigger you are, the more of those kind of criteria you have to satisfy. A second key priority for the legislature, of course, was prioritizing small cultivators and ensuring that the market really is made up of a diverse ecosystem of our craft cultivators instead of a few large corporations. This, of course, is not only important to shift the current small cultivator illicit market into a regulated space, but it's also the key to the long-term viability of Vermont's cannabis industry. Given our size and our climate and our general topography, Vermont has always had difficulty competing on volume. If and when federal legalization happens, all of the demand for cannabis in Vermont could easily be supplied by one or two mega farms in Massachusetts or New York, and really drown out whatever we're trying to create here in Vermont. So we really need to take this opportunity while there is still federal prohibition and build a system that has kind of a very unique DNA, one that embraces the craft Vermont culture, the value-added supply chain that we see kind of in our beer and maple syrup and cheese industry. So, the question is, how do we get there? And one, we're trying to make our licensing structure, including our fee structure, relatively unattractive to larger corporations that really grow this kind of generic cannabis that no one's willing to travel to Vermont for. And honestly, given the size of our licenses, these would be considered kind of, not really profitable compared to other states anyway. So who knows what the long-term viability of a kind of 30,000 square foot cultivation center is when, right next door we have 100,000 square foot cultivation centers. But second, really create a regulatory environment that's welcoming to what we have, some of the best craft growers in the country right here in Vermont, and have them really be the kind of engine of diversification and quality. I hate to get too impassioned about cannabis, but really the kind of emerging frontier of the industry is, we're moving away from just growing kind of high THC, high octane cannabis to genetics, diversified genetics, and really understanding the cannabinoid profile of a plant and trying to kind of create new strains. And Vermont has an opportunity right now to be the kind of center of excellence on this if we really push competition in small cultivators. So the board has a number of strategies that we've put into our rules to do this. I'm happy to talk about any of those strategies and at any point, but just very quickly, the other priorities are environmental stewardship and sustainability. This includes encouraging outdoor cultivation whenever possible, but also setting standards around building envelopes for indoor cultivators, lighting requirements, HVAC systems, wastewater systems. And we have developed these in consultation with the Public Service Department. And what's really incredible about this is that Efficiency Vermont really saw the writing on the wall when Home Grow passed in 2017. And they've developed a whole host of rebate and incentive programs that are designed to help small cannabis businesses switch out their lights, upgrade their greenhouses, install smart HVAC systems. They'll even, come to your farm and help you kind of figure out a better way to plant your crops that's more efficient. It's a really incredible kind of program that we have here and an opportunity that we have to kind of get this right at the outset. Of course, the kind of traditional youth prevention education is a key priority. We have some of the most restrictive advertising regulations in the country that really will ensure that there's not going to be messaging that's directed at kind of encouraging use and having any sort of deceptive advertising that's targeted at kind of increasing usage. There's 30% of the excise tax is going to prevention and substance misuse programming. The entirety of the sales tax is going towards after-school programming. It's an incredible opportunity. We heard from Vermont After School, and only 50, they sent out a survey seeing, how many people needed after-school programs. And, 50% of the people that responded, so not even 50% of Vermonters, but 50% of the people that responded said that they wanted after school, but they didn't have an opportunity. There was no places open, or they had transportation issues, or there were affordability issues. So this is really a historic investment in what really is the time, the times between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., where kids are not supervised and they are engaging in risky behavior, including using drugs or controlled substances. So I'm really excited about that piece of this as well. We have very strict consumer protection and testing mandates. And there's a lot in the bill that really supports highway safety. So those are the kind of priorities that we listed out. And we've really tried to use those as our guiding principles in developing rules. So then the question is, I think more relevant here today is, where are we? So the board, since it was seated in April, has held between the board and our advisory committee, we've held over 100 public meetings, all of which have been recorded if anyone wants to go back and watch the process unfold. But we've developed and filed our rules. We've received hundreds of public comments on them, and we are in the process of systematically reviewing all the public comments and making kind of adjustments to our rules, fine-tuning them. We've submitted 4 legislative reports around our fee structure, around our staffing needs, and a few other discrete issues that the legislature asked our opinion of. We've assumed control of the medical program as well as their 3 staff members. We're developing our application portal so that people can apply for these licenses. And we're also developing our seed to sale tracking platform. And again, perhaps most relevant, we have some critical pieces of legislation that need to advance before the market can open. So first and foremost, there is a fee bill. There's a draft of it in House Ways and Means. They generally, I think, get started on revenue generating bills. So this sets out the fees for all of our various license types. It's very accommodating to small cultivators. And it ratchets up kind of fees based upon the size of the operation. And we tried to kind of keep it relatively in line with some of our neighbors. We're higher than our neighbors, but essentially we don't want to be so far out of line with any other neighbor. So I guess, on the fee bill, one of the most, I think, unfortunate consequences of the board not being sat until late, kind of the waning days of the legislature, weeks of the legislature in 2021 was really, we were supposed to give you our fee recommendations last year. And that would have really, I think, given the legislature the time it needed to kind of look at what our budget potential was, look at kind of really dig into the fees. And unfortunately that, has to be accelerated if we are to meet any of our kind of legislative milestones, including opening the market to small cultivators on May 1st. And again, that date, while it was created legislatively, is not arbitrary. If these small outdoor cultivators want to participate in the market in year 1, they need to have a legal path to planting their seeds, getting their seeds in the ground, getting their clones in the ground as early as possible in the growing cycle, so that sometimes you can barely squeak out one harvest if you're an outdoor cultivator in Vermont. While some of these other timelines might have been somewhat arbitrary, that May 1st deadline is in our head. It's our target date, and we're going to do everything we can to achieve it. So that the fee bill really is the first domino that needs to fall. The second is really our staffing needs. So we've proposed a budget that includes 11 positions. That's 6 compliance and enforcement positions, 3 licensing positions, a business manager, and a data analyst. So, I know that 11 positions, makes people's stomach turn over, particularly during lunch. But this really is the bare minimum that we need in order to get this job done effectively. We've done some analysis on in a report that we submitted to the appropriations committees on the kind of staff to licensee ratio in all of the other legal states. And this really would put us at the kind of bare bones level of staffing compared to the other adult use states in the country. And, you know, honestly, our mandate is slightly different than most other states. You know, we really are trying to focus we'll have an exclusivity period for small cultivators to enter. And if we are able to kind of hit some of our production goals with respect to small cultivators, then we may never open any large license types here in Vermont, which would be a different approach than any other state has taken. So the staffing needs, and again on that, we've reached out to our partners at some of our other agencies that potentially could help us with this work. And we've, you know, the kind of general consensus is that you're either kind of staffing up those agencies or you're staffing up ours. And so, you know, obviously that's a legislative decision to make, but I think that there are some real efficiencies and some cross training that we can do if we bring kind of our entire compliance team in-house. So again, we also have a few technical amendment bills. We have there's, you know, a clarification bill. I guess it's somewhat of a policy shift that outdoor cultivation, and the bill is limited to small cultivators, that's 1,000 square feet or less, should be considered agriculture. This is an important bill. It's been something that from the very beginning of from our very first meeting, small cultivators have been telling us that this is important for them. And really, the reason why I think it's primarily important is that, you know, if you call up a zoning administrator in 25 different towns and ask them about cannabis cultivation, you'll get 25 different responses as to where it can happen. And that's a real problem when we think about kind of equity and consistency and just people's ability to predict where they can actually participate. I mean, access to land, access to capital are the two major barriers to entry to this market. And if small farmers that already have an existing greenhouse can't grow in that greenhouse or can't grow kind of on their property, which is zoned agriculture, you know, they're just not going to participate. So this to me is a very important kind of cleanup bill if for nothing else, for clarity for small cultivators, small outdoor cultivators who we really are trying to prioritize. There's a bill that's going to start taking testimony in the House Judiciary Committee. It contains a lot of kind of what I would consider technical amendments that really help with the efficiency of the market. It does things along the lines of, you know, currently, I don't want to get hyper technical here, but employees are essentially aren't allowed to move in this industry by the statute without reapplying for a new employee license because their license is tied to their employer. So we want to decouple that, kind of just like you would get a nursing license, you're going to get now a cannabis license, and that license moves with the employer. So it affords some greater mobility for cannabis workers, which we think is important. You know, you know, most of the stuff really is technical in that bill. It does allow for high THC concentrates, which are currently prohibited. It removes that prohibition. And we'll see kind of, that was at the advice of our advisory committee, that really, if we want to shift the illicit market into a regulated space, we need to really think about what products are prevalent on the illicit market and bring them into kind of some regulatory compliance and make them at least safer for the people that are using them, producing them. And then I'm trying to think what else we have going. I think that pretty much covers the kind of the four areas that we've asked the legislature for. We've submitted a number of reports that also kind of, you know, think about the future of the market. You know, are we going to allow delivery? Are we going to allow kind of limited kind of like farmers markets down the road when we can really kind of get direct to consumer sales on the farm? Are we going to allow social consumption sites? And so we've kind of evaluated other states. We've looked at where things stand on a number of different issues, and we've made recommendations in consultation with our advisory committee, and honestly, in consultation with members of the public. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are watching our work very closely and feel very strongly about these issues, and have, I think a lot of their comments are reflected in our reports. So I guess I'll just leave. I'll end before I turn things back over to you, Senator Clarkson. I'll just end where I started, which is a really huge thank you for the Senate's continued focus on this program. It really is an industry that is constantly changing, constantly evolving. There's new kind of, whether it's Delta 8 THC or, any other number of issues that just crop up overnight and require a response from the board. And just kind of like we do with the captive insurance industry, this is a market that needs continuous oversight and housekeeping if we really want to be kind of a center of excellence in the country. And I think we can get there. I think that what I'm trying to say is that we're probably going to come back year after year with new rules, modifications to our rules, and new asks for legislative tweaks. But, luckily, we have Bryn, who really knows how to use your time effectively and efficiently. So, thank you for your time today, and happy to stick around and take any questions that folks may have.
Thank you. I think we already have a couple questions, and I think Senator Ram Hinsdale, you are the first.
Thanks, Allison. So James, some may see this as a departure from what you shared about the market, but I certainly don't feel it's a departure, and I know many others don't, who feel harmed by the failed war on drugs. As Senator White pointed out, you did do a sort of tour around the state, and I heard from one of the other members of your board that there's still a lot of unresolved feelings for people, particularly people of color, low-income people, people with disabilities, from the harm that they experienced from past law enforcement regimes around regulating or criminalizing marijuana. That led someone else on your board to say it would be good to revisit language I introduced last year that would give some revenue from marijuana to small grants for smaller communities that don't have large budgets to have conversations around policing and public safety. Have you talked about that as a full board? And do you see that as something that came out of your public process that you want to re-engage with this session?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it's something that we've had numerous conversations about as a board, and as our advisory committee. We kind of broke people into subcommittees based upon their expertise, and we had a social equity subcommittee, and this came to the forefront almost immediately. And then not just for conversations around policing, but really around community reinvestment writ large for communities that have been disproportionately impacted, and the kind of second and third order of criminal history records that have made disenfranchised people in any number of ways. It's a difficult conversation because I personally don't feel like it's the board's job to direct the legislature on how it makes or how it invests the cannabis revenue. However, I do feel very strongly that our advisory committee, who really dug into this issue, feels very strongly that there should be community reinvestment of this money. And so in our January 15th report, we do have a recommendation that a certain portion of the excise tax go towards community reinvestment. And I just note there that, the language is probably a little bit nuanced, but we did put in there that it's our advisory committee that recommends a specific amount of that revenue. And I think they suggested 20%.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's terrific update. I have Senator McCormick, and then
Thanks. Continuing on that line, have you run your plans by the, and proposals by the state's racial equity executive, Susanna Davis? Has she commented?
Yes, and she served on the social equity subcommittee, and she also kind of gives us bi-monthly trainings. So we stay pretty closely in touch with Susanna, and but she did serve on that social equity subcommittee and was part of the recommendation to contribute 20% of the excise tax.
Has she basically signed off on what you're proposing?
I would, it's hard to, yes, I would say yes. But, I think we left a lot to be, we said that 20% should go towards community reinvestment. That is, a very difficult term to unpack what that means, how that money gets allocated. So I would say conceptually, yes, but the specifics are really kind of difficult to parse through.
And when we were developing the legislation that your work is based on now, there were objections raised from spokespeople of people of color that what we were envisioning was capital intensive and therefore would be inherently discriminatory against people who did not have access to capital. Has that been addressed?
It's impossible to address fully without federal legalization. Essentially, all of the banks and financial institutions in this state have said that they're not comfortable lending to any cannabis establishment. And so really you have to kind of scrape together money from friends, family, and fools, right? I guess is the saying, in order to get together to get enough capital to launch one of these industry or one of these businesses. However, the legislature did create and fund a cannabis business development fund, which is targeted at social equity applicants to help provide a little bit of startup capital. And we as a board kind of went one step further and said, if you're a large corporation, if you're one of our largest license holders, you have to donate a certain amount of your profits to that development fund.
Right. Thank you. This is terrific. It's just what we were hoping for this. Bring us more up to speed. I see Senator Starr. You're muted, Bobby.
Thank you. James, did you think about the small growers? Is there anything in there that geographically keeps those spread around the state? So if there are many, they would be scattered in different parts of the state?
So we haven't really focused on that aspect of it. However, there is a provision of the law. You gave us the authority to think about the kind of proper functioning of the market and prioritize applications based upon that need, the need to have kind of a diversified kind of system. But we have done, I think what you intended, which is we waived about a third of our regulations for small cultivators to help reduce the barriers to entry. We've kind of created some unique license types that really give small cultivators advantages to grow both indoor and outdoor and kind of really accommodate the way that they, meet them where they're at and accommodate the way that they like to grow. So I think Vermont really is going to kind of be a pioneer in focusing exclusively on small cultivators. And then, the idea for us is really to open up the smaller cultivation tiers first and see if we can get to that kind of target of 450 to 500,000 square feet of canopy that we need to satisfy the demand in Vermont using only small cultivators. And if we are falling short of that kind of target number, then we'll start opening up the larger tiers.
Thank you.
No geographic areas of distribution of those licenses, though.
We have the authority to, as I mentioned, we have the authority to look at that and kind of prioritize if there's no cultivation in the Northeast Kingdom or in Windham County, we can kind of say, well, we need some more cultivation down in those areas. And we can move people around in the queue if we need to. But really, we've kind of limited our focus on just getting all of the small cultivators in. Encouraging them all to come in.
Thank you.
Thanks. Unless other people, we're going to have an update from Senator Kitchell on the BAA, but before we go, I just want to make sure that if there are other questions, I have a question, Pepper, which is how many municipalities at this point have opted in?
It's a constantly evolving number, but I think it's right around 30 at this point that have actively opted in. However, a few more, I think maybe like 6 or 7 more have voted to put this on their ballot for town meeting day.
Okay, great. So we'll have an update on that because Senator Starr, that goes a little bit to the geographic distribution. When you have that, would you be kind enough to share that with us? Because it would be interesting to see how that could map onto the geographic distribution, which Senator Starr is and the Ag Committee, I assume, is concerned with, just like the.
Allison, may I ask a question?
Oh,
So remember that
Senator White.
Remember that only applies to retail. It does not apply to grow facilities. It only applies to retail.
Right.
And the other kink in that, I guess, is that there are many towns, it's misunderstood, and that some towns who think they're voting yes to allow it, it means that there's going to be an establishment there. And that isn't true because they still have to go through all the steps that the board is putting forward in terms of qualifying and putting together a good business plan and getting investors and all that. So I think that there's a huge misunderstanding out there among towns. But it is only for retail.
Can I just add one point? Sorry, I know the time is really short, but this is just an important thing for everyone here, which is the board has a roughly 7-page FAQ document on every municipal issue that we've been asked about that we could think of around taxing, zoning, opting in, opting out, public safety, public consumption, everything that we could think of. And it's up on our website. We worked with the Vermont League and have sent it around to all the select boards, but we really do want people to opt in, and we think people just need answers to their questions before they feel comfortable.
Thank you. Any other I guess my last question for you is about licensees and the license that goes with the licensee, and who will do that licensing? Is OPR working with you, or
the board is going to do it itself. We are going to have kind of an online portal for people to submit. We've been working with OPR to kind of learn their best practices around when we should issue these. Should we have windows? We've been working very closely. They're our neighbors here in this building. So we get to spend a lot of time with them about best practices, but it's going to be done in-house at the Cannabis Board.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? I'm sorry if we have. Okay, great. Pepper, thank you very much. This was terrific and just what we needed. We needed an update and a sort of whole picture. So it sounds like it's in finance, ways and means, ag, a bunch of other places. So we look forward to seeing it all come together with moving this incredibly important business forward. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yep.
Yeah, it's great to see you. And Senator Kitchell, I'm going to ask you to give us an update on the budget adjustment bill, which is moving fairly fast in the Senate and has arrived at the beginning, I guess, at the end of this week. Now,
the House passed
last week, right?
Yeah, the House passed it Friday, and we're going to start up markup this today. Representative Hooper is coming in to kind of give us an overview of the high points of what they added. I can just tell you in a couple of areas, the workforce stabilization and workforce retention amount has been increased substantially to 60 million. but we need to figure out how that's working, what funds can be available to leverage it. So not that the overall amount is viewed as excessive. In fact, the administration had 33 million, which we felt was totally inadequate. There are some other adjustments, but we are going to have to do some crosswalk with economic development on some of the housing proposals. They have VHIP in for 20 million, but no policy parameters. And so we've got to coordinate. Otherwise, they would go out under the old rules. And I know economic development spent a lot of time trying to set forth policy framework for that benefit. So our goal is to have the money pretty well finalized by Friday so that we can vote this out early next week. There are a number of things where ARPA, we had appropriated ARPA money. It's not going to be permissible. That was in the area of loan repayment with some weatherization. But otherwise, it's going to, I think, be moved very quickly. We've been keeping a list of all the requests, and they seem to be coming in fairly quickly. So I just want to assure everybody we're keeping a list. So we have everything from the New Haven depot move to administrative costs to whatever. So I think just to give you some idea, we have Friday as our deadline to pretty much finish up markup and make sure that everybody's requests have been considered, and look forward to getting some additional information. Requests just came in from finance on an extension of that individual group market language. And so there's just a lot of moving pieces to keep track of. Some things, if it doesn't mean if it's not in the budget adjustment, it won't be maybe considered within the context of the big bill. So I just want to let people know that some things may just take a little bit more time than we can deal with in the context of budget adjustment. So with that, I would simply say that's our plan. If we vote it out like early next week, then it would be on the calendar for action by the end of next week, assuming
Right.
everything goes well.
And Senator Kitchell, can you just give us a notion of what the total of the budget adjustment is at the moment?
Well, in the House passed version, it was about 431 million. The other thing that's also happening, and that is we've got to crosswalk what's happening in the pension bill, because
Right.
the House reserved the 50 million, but we're going to probably put, because it's so important for the optics to have that money in the pension bill, to move unreserve the 150 and add the 50 million for the 200 million that's been talked about to deal with underfunding of the two pension systems. So that's the other thing that's taking time, is making sure that we're coordinating with other bills where there's that kind of financial interplay. And I don't know, Senator White, what your time frame is on the pension bill to get it out of committee, but that's obviously a big piece. Some of that funding, particularly for prepay of the healthcare benefits, would be taken care of in the big bill. It doesn't have to go in the BAA.
I'll talk, we can talk about that.
Okay.
Right. Thank you. Any questions for Senator Kitchell on the budget adjustment?
The only other thing that I would raise, and we had some discussion, and that was just a follow up on the comment. The Cannabis Board did ask for 11 positions. The House decided to move in the budget adjustment with 3. We're taking a second look at that. Maybe it's not all 11 within the context of budget adjustment, but there was committee discussion that if we're starting up a new program, we want to do everything possible for a good startup, and And sometimes if you are too tight on the resources, it might compromise that. So that's a decision we have not made, but it's in light of the comment that Pepper made about the requested positions. I wanted to let people know what came over from the House and what we will be looking at. So we've asked for a timeline when certain functions, a number of the positions are, 6 of them are compliance. And, when you're starting up, looking at what that looks like on the timetable when certain positions would be necessary to have on board.
Thank you. Any questions for Senator Kitchell? Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's helpful, particularly for those of us who have policy pieces that need to come in and help lay foundations for the money pieces. And anybody else have an update of something they would that is up this week that they want to chat about? We have a few minutes left, and I'm happy to. We only have 3 minutes left. Does anybody have something quickly that they need to update the caucus on about what's coming up this week? Okay, great. Well, Senator Bray.
Yeah, we have some committee bills for things that could not be drafted in the November timeframe because there was things in flux. So I'm just cognizant, I think probably everyone is, of the January 31st deadline, which is Monday. So I've just asked Secretary Bloomer over the weekend for a clarification of what introduction formally entails, and it means being read for the first time on the floor, not necessarily introduced in your committee. So we'll have some bills coming to the floor to go through first reading, and then we'd be requesting to refer them back to our committee. So since that doesn't happen all that often, but it may happen with more than one committee, I just thought flag it as kind of a air traffic control note for anyone who's watching a calendar and trying to make sure they can hit all the deadlines. And I know you can go to Senate rules and ask to be released later, but if you're trying to avoid that path, just want to let people know.
And I just got a note from Bloomer that said that because the 31st is on a Monday, it's actually this Friday.
Right. So it's tight.
And these, I'll remind everybody, this is for committee bills.
Yes.
Right. Terrific. Thank you all. This was terrific. I appreciate, and thank you for your hard work. And now we get to go back to it. So thank you all. See you